democracy and set a vision for the future. An important announcement. I request all the participants to pay attention to this. Since this is going to be an interactive session, the floor would be open for the audience to pose their questions to the panelists present here with us today. Having said that, my first question to you, sir, Jayaprakash sir, is that in a general sense, one of the most critical ways individuals can influence governmental decision making is through voting. So, how would you describe the power of the vote in a democratic nation like India?
Muskan, the answer is self-evident. No, obviously, without voting, without exercising free franchise, and without applying your mind and making a decision as to who should take charge of the collective affairs and what they should be doing. It's not about merely who, but it's also about what. Then there is no democracy. Having said that, and I have been one of the staunchest advocates of everybody voting, and Loksatta movement has been deeply involved in both improvement of voter registration and enlisting young people and middle classes to come and participate in the political process, be engaged. Having said that, if democracy is reduced to merely voting and shouting, that is a sad democracy. Right. Unfortunately, our democracy is now largely reduced to voting and shouting. We vote with great fanfare. There is so much of celebration, so much of a festive atmosphere, and so much of noise and, as we call in Telugu, a Tirunala, a Panduga. But unfortunately, in the most cases, I'm saying it with the deepest sense of responsibility and with a sense of optimism. Because unless we understand where we have deficiencies, we cannot improve things. Unfortunately, the link between the vote that we give and the consequences of what happens to our lives, that is missing in our democratic process. So we have a classic case of operation success, patient dead. There is fierce competition for electoral success. Perhaps nowhere on earth do we have so much of competition for even inconsequential offices, not inconsequential in concept, but inconsequential in practice. Like take a sarpanch, take a municipal chairman, there's zero power. And yet the amount of competition, the ferocity of it is incredible. Just to be there, to be recognized. But the purpose of it all is lost. So in a centralized democracy where people have no understanding of what the vote really means and where the tax money goes, what's happening is people are voting more as a festival. And it's not surprising, therefore, that the poorest are the ones who vote most in India, because that gives them a recognition, that gives them identity.
Absolutely.
It's also because they are hugely dependent on the government for small things, and the government machinery and the political machine, they cannot afford not to vote. Yes, and the educated and the middle classes, who should be the backbone of a democracy, they generally shun voting. Though there is some improvement in recent years, they are the people who don't care. That itself shows that our democracy, there's something seriously wrong. And B, in order to entice the poor to vote and to vote for them, in a poor country where outcomes are not generated through political process, vote buying has become now endemic. You've seen the Huzurabad by-election in the state where I now sit and Ramesh sits, and both of us incidentally are doctors. I didn't mention that about him. It is widely rumored that about 150 to 200 crores was spent for one assembly by-election in one small state in one of the poorest countries on earth. That money is roughly equivalent to the total amount spent in the parliamentary election in Britain by both the major parties in the whole country. Absolutely. I mean, just understand the import of what we are discussing. One tiny assembly constituency, which has no consequence to who will be in power and what they do, versus the whole Britain, a country that governed us for 150 years, still one of the at least major powers, if not a great power today, one of the wealthiest countries on earth, one of the most civilized countries. The whole country's parliamentary election by two major parties, they spent almost equal money as one assembly by-election in India. Now, obviously, if that is what voting is, then there is a problem. We have to fix it. And the second thing that's happening is Supreme Court 2 days ago came up with as usual, one of those landmark, I don't know how many landmark judgments the courts give. If every landmark judgment is a landmark, Indian history should have changed 100 times. But this is more bombast than substance. But nevertheless, about the freebies. Why are freebies necessary? Because the
Yes.
government is not able to deliver in a credible manner the things that really matter for the collective good. Education, healthcare, infrastructure, job creation, rule of law, and so on and so forth. And therefore, you have to offer something tangible to a person at a personal level to give short-term satisfaction. It is instant gratification because there's no long-term available. And people, it's not because people are bad, it's because people have despaired. They don't have any faith that something long-term, tangible, real, that makes a difference to their lives is going to happen. And therefore, they're content with getting something every month or whatever.
Yes, sir.
So
Absolutely.
obviously the answer at first sight is yes. I mean, voting is incredibly important. But if we limit our democratic ambitions and understanding to voting, then it will be a sorry country. There's a lot more to democracy than mere voting and shouting. They're necessary,
Yes, sir.
not sufficient.
Yes, sir.
You know, as Ramesh said, the electorate actually is voting more in numbers as the election becomes more local. Typically, the state elections attract greater attention than the parliamentary election. The local elections, not municipalities, but panchayats in particular, they attract greater attention than the state election. But unfortunately, what happened is, and this is the heart of our crisis in the country, local governments are schools for democracy. They teach us the art of self-governance, the meaning of self-governance, the meaning of vote and the consequences, and the link between taxes and services. But because Constitution initially did not create effective local governments, there was only a pious proclamation of intent in the directive principles, and with great reluctance and in a very half-baked manner, in an extremely ham-handed manner, a very overstructured, underpowered local government structure was institutionalized in the Constitution through 73rd, 74th Amendments. Therefore, we have a large number of local government representatives elected without any governmental powers. We don't even use the expression local governments. If I notice, you guys did not use the expression local government, you said local bodies.
Yes.
So these are inconsequential. Even the Constitution, no, the constitutional provisions relating to local governments run into 7,700 words. The American Constitution, when it was promulgated, had a total length of 4,700 words. With all the amendments to date, in more than 230 years, it now has 7,400 words, still shorter than the 73rd, 74th Amendments about panchayats and municipalities. What is the sum and substance? Inconsequential local governments we created. So while people obviously are more enthused about local issues, that's what democracy is. And in India, our people are actually much more sensible. Elsewhere in the world, they care more about federal governments, etc. But here, they really are concerned about local governments. But the power is zero. Earlier, there was no power in even the states. But over the last 30 years, in the midst of tremendous decline in the nature of our politics, one significant improvement is states have come into their own. They have become really the architects of their own destiny in many, many ways. Though still there are some complaints. No, in a large federal democracy, it's a continuing process. But things have improved considerably.
Yes, sir.
But local governments are completely enfeebled.
Right.
So is this disjunction between the people's perceptions of what should happen and what really is happening constitutionally, that is the tragedy of the country. In the process, the MLA has become the uncrowned king of the constituency. The MLA has not been elected to be an executive. But in reality, in most parts of India, in the eyes of the people and the media and the middle classes and themselves, the MLA is the uncrowned king, the undeclared executive, disguised executive. So we have perverted the constitutional process. They have no real authority, and yet they have the responsibility. And they have informal power. Every transfer, posting, contract, tender, police case is decided by them, oftentimes illegitimately. And the ones who ought to have that duty, authority with responsibility, the local governments are completely enfeebled. And that's the reason why people never learn the art of democracy. Let me just conclude with one brief point.
Sure, sir.
I'm now sitting in the 5th floor apartment of mine. All our apartments, we all pay monthly maintenance. We have all chosen somebody like Ramesh, who is competent, whom we trust, to take care of our collective affairs. Now, supposing the elevator does not function, the parking is not properly organized, there's no proper watch and ward, or I don't get water supply to my apartment, we're going to holler. We're going to shout from rooftops and get it done because I know where my money is going, why I'm paying that money. I know why we have chosen Mr. Bhalla to take care of all this. If Mr. Bhalla says, JP Saab, I'll give you 100 rupees every month, keep quiet, I'll beat him up. Because it's my money. Who is it to give me my money? I want him to deliver the collective services. That's the reason why I put him there. That's the reason why I give money. This is the understanding that comes when the government is local, when there's a link between what you vote and what you get, what you pay as taxes and what you get as services. When that link is missing, that is when you buy the vote. That is when you offer freebies. Every month I give you this instead of doing my duty, namely give you education, healthcare, infrastructure, rule of law, etc. That is when we divide people on caste, region, religion, language. And that's why Ramesh said something very profound. Voting is a prerequisite, but it's not a substitute to democracy. In the absence of effective and accountable local governments, there is no real democracy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Before moving on to the session, I would like to acknowledge the presence of V.V. Lakshmi Narayana Garu, former Additional Director, Central Bureau of Investigation. We would love to have you here, sir. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for joining us today, sir. Well, moving on to the next question. My question is to you, sir, Jayaprakash, sir. So why do you think the youth of India, the world's largest democracy and the country with highest youth population, are not interested in voting their representatives?
I think actually things have improved. In the past 25, 30 years, I've been in the public domain, outside government. Certainly things have improved. The urban people, the middle classes and the youth are taking more interest. But the problem is that interest generating tangible outcomes? See, merely exhorting the youth, please be engaged, be in the democratic process, go vote and register yourself, and all this is wonderful. But if that leads to consequences that matter, enthusiasm sustains. If you merely are flag waving and give some sloganeering and say, please join and do kuch karo, ye karo, Bharat Bharat Mahan, after some time, the reality will kick in.
Definitely,
that's what's happening in India. My team was telling me just, I think yesterday, that 51% of the young people in a survey by Mint or some other newspaper, they said we want authoritarianism in the country. Even at a global level, there's actually a challenge. At a fundamental level, today there is a great laboratory in operation, where on the one hand, China, on the other hand, India, a democratic model, an authoritarian, nationalist, authoritarian, rational model, a democratic, dysfunctional, somewhat messy model, both are now competing. Now, China is able to boldly say, look, you fellows are not able to deliver. We are able to deliver. In a Harvard survey, the other day again, I was astounded. 93% of Chinese expressed satisfaction and happiness with their government. 37% of Americans expressed satisfaction about their government. I don't readily have the figures about India, maybe somewhere in between, but there is a fundamental challenge to the democratic idea. For long, from 1940s, after Second World War, to about 1990s, we equated democracy and market economy and freedom with prosperity. Now, there is a model which is showing that authoritarianism, nationalism, rational policy, and public-spirited leadership can bring tremendous results, and democracy is not always able to match. And when India fails in that context, in a historic context, democracy fails in the world. And we are so obsessed with our power games, whether I am the MLA, whether I am the MP, whether I form the government, whether my son is taking the gaddi after me or something else, we have forgotten what it's all about. An election is not about who is in office, it's about what happens while you're in office. It's not about what happens during the election, it's about what happens after the election. And there we have faltered quite a bit. And whatever advances we made, Ramesh made that point initially, that, or I think one of your anchors made that point, that India made spectacular advances. Let's be utterly truthful. Most advances that happened are technological and scientific, unrelated to governance and polity.
True, sir.
They would have happened anywhere. They happened in Uganda, they happened in Rwanda, they happened in Timbuktu, they happened everywhere. They happened here too.
Yeah.
But in terms of our conscious effort to bring about improvements, I think there is a very long road ahead. Our education is in shambles. I want to be very I can say wonderful things about the country. I am a great optimist. I'm one of the most optimistic Indians. But it does not mean that I'm a romantic idiot who doesn't understand the realities. Our education is in shambles. 80% of the kids in this country have no future because our schooling is a disgrace. 50% of kids in Telangana between the ages of 14 and 18 cannot read a watch and tell time in hours and minutes between 14 and 15 in the year 2022. Our healthcare, both of us are doctors. Ramesh did his best in government. I've been doing my best for several years. I've been the architect of the National Health Mission. Our healthcare is in shambles despite enormous capacity. Just to give two examples. So if you don't deliver, if you actually don't lift people out of poverty, if you don't enhance the capacities of human beings, your liberty is meaningless. It's a joke. True liberty is when I have inner capacity, when I stand on my own feet, when my words matter, when my work matters. So we have to do a lot. Until that time, this democratic talk and youth and joy in politics, worry about politics, what is the purpose and meaning of politics? That we have forgotten. It's not about who is in power. Morning to evening, when I watch discussions on TV, I read newspapers. And mercifully, I don't watch TV, I don't read newspapers. But by chance, by mistake, when I surf a channel, if I watch for 30 seconds, I regret that. This is not democracy. This is not meaningful public discourse. We have to really, really learn a great deal about the art of democracy and self-governance.
Yes, sir.
As Ramesh said, there's been a significant improvement in our union-state relations, not the whole federalism, because federalism includes the third tier of government. But I also mentioned briefly earlier, while there are a lot of decline in politics in the past 30 years, this is one area, the federalism, where things have improved actually considerably. So there are 5 things in my judgment that have happened in terms of federalism. One is, of course, Bombay case judgment, where it's no longer possible to simply do as you please without any judicial review. The second is, as Ramesh mentioned, the increasing political competition, particularly rise of regional parties. Therefore, the monopoly of power is now has given way to more competitive politics across the country. And the third is the economic reform itself. In the license permit quota Raj, centralization was the norm. Without going to Delhi for every small thing, a small entrepreneur, a small work, you have to go to Delhi and beg them. And therefore, the power was very oppressive. Once that is given up, states are coming to their own. It's not an accident that the states are coming to their own since 1991. The fourth is the government of India's role in public sector investments has declined considerably because private sector has become more important. Government has no longer the ability. Earlier, they did at will. Kerala always has a grouse that there was no big PSU built in Kerala. So they could punish or reward states depending on their political proclivities. And finally, the Finance Commission. One of the lesser recognized successes of India is the Finance Commission of India. From more chaotic, more arbitrary distribution of resources, slowly it moved towards a principle-based, a formula-based things. Earlier, used to have 85% income tax, 40% centralized, God knows why, what, where. Now, it started from 10th Finance Commission, but the 14th Finance Commission made it a much more robust one. And therefore, the division of resources is no longer discretionary. There's always some element of discretion in politics, but that is largely limited. While states keep complaining there's injustice, in a large measure in our democracy, either within the state among sub-regions or across the country, it's not very true that there is a lot of injustice. Some amount of favoritism is normal in politics, or in life perhaps, but this non-discretionary distribution of resources. All these 5 have improved in the last 30 years. And federalism has actually become much stronger than ever before.
Well, that actually brings me to the next question, sir. So, Jayaprakash, sir, so if we look at the electoral data again, we can see that the independent candidates used to get over 20% of the vote. So today, when we are at the Loksatta election results, we can see a similar pattern with the number of votes falling from 15% to around 4%. What, according to you, could be the reason for this?
Muskan, world over, democracy means parties. You like it or not, because people require platforms of political participation. Theoretically, everybody can participate, but there has to be a framework, an organization, an infrastructure. Switzerland is the only exception because of a 1,000-year history, small cantons and all kinds of things. So that unusual exception cannot be the norm. My namesake, Loknaik JP, argued for partyless democracy. The leaders of the American Republic, the founding fathers, they detested political parties. But the truth is, however detestable they are, without political parties, there is no modern democracy. Because political parties, except Congress, were never properly organized initially, there was no real competition. In the early days, there was space for independence. About a significant number. In Andhra Pradesh, I remember in those days, 54 members were elected as independents. Today, it's unthinkable. And the few independents elected are dissidents of a major party who were denied a seat, who have the clout and name recognition and the caste power locally, and therefore won, and immediately after the election, they joined a party. Or they are supported by a major party, but notionally they're independent. Therefore, when you look at electoral reform or any kind of electoral system change, you must look at the political parties. That's the reality. A non-independent, a non-party candidate has near zero chance of success.
Right, sir.
But this is not unusual to India. This is usual to almost all major democracies. We may detest parties, but they are a necessity. Therefore, any reform has to be not only about the government and the governance structure, but also the political parties. In fact, major reforms world over, they were brought about in the political party. When Thatcher, you like Thatcher, dislike Thatcher is immaterial, but she reshaped the Conservative Party. Reagan, he reshaped the Republican Party. In some ways, Clinton, he reshaped the Democratic Party. So their role in reshaping the party is central. Or Tony Blair, he reshaped the Labour Party. So their role in reshaping a political party is what reshaped the country. It's not the other way around. So parties are central to the way a nation is governed, and our parties are a disaster.
Thank you for that insight, sir.
So moving on to the next question. Every voter, regardless of educational background, has an opinion on the country's politics and election alternatives, which should be evidence of India's grassroots democracy. However, the pandemic and the government's response to have raised new concerns about the typical Indian electoral literacy. So, do you believe that electoral literacy is a requirement for a healthy democracy in India?
On COVID, I have a slightly different perspective. We messed up in some respects. There were some big bloomers. For instance, the premature lockdown without adequate preparation led to enormous hardship of millions of people, the migrant laborers in this country. It was wholly avoidable. This is what happens when centralized decision-making, even if it's well-meaning, without adequate understanding of the reality situation happens, and the system simply hands over power to one human being to make a whimsical decision. The delay in vaccine development, if the government actually funded vaccine development, because any kind of drug development, vaccines in particular, is a very costly and cumbersome exercise, very risky a venture. Unless the governments, even the United States, which is wedded to free market, came up with $8 billion funding to the companies to de-risk them and therefore accelerated the development of vaccines. We failed that. People like me were urging from day one, we have the vaccine capability, we have the companies, but without the financial muscle. And unless that is there, there'll be delay. And the third is ICMR lost its credibility quite a bit, too many flip-flops. And recently, I was ashamed when they said that the booster dose is not necessary to prevent Omicron or something, which is the whole world clearly, global, unless you know, all the scientists of the world and scientific organizations of the world are wrong. And I simply am not a scientist at that scale. I only understand what they're saying. But I presume if the best scientific bodies of the world after evidence is saying something, and our ICMR publicly states, it's losing credibility. But barring that, once we paid a humongous price in April and May because of Delta wave, because of our own stupidity and lack of preparation, I think in the last 7-8 months, India has done remarkably well. Considering we're a desperately poor country, starved of resources, we have actually done extremely well. And that's why the Omicron wave almost did not touch the country. And India this year is going to be the fastest growing economy in the world, which is not saying much because the base has shrunken, but that's true for the whole world. But the point I'm making is this is not an unmitigated disaster. We probably lost about 2 to 3 million people. Officially, we say about 500,000, but I think 5 times the number is my estimate. Some estimates put it a higher number, but even that number, while it is horrendous, when you compare it to the global norm, it's not an incredible number. We could have saved many lives. But the real tragedy of COVID and real tragedy of public discourse and political literacy, and that's where the connecting link is the COVID crisis of India is not the COVID crisis. It simply exposed the weaknesses of our healthcare system, whether lack of oxygen or inadequate beds or hospitals or access to care or the ability to afford and so on and so forth. These are healthcare problems. These are not problems created by COVID. It's a pretension. It simply exposed the hollowness of our system. And what I feel very angry about, very passionate about is, post that, there is no discussion in the media, no discussion in the political parties or legislatures about, all right, we bungled, but we recovered somewhat, but there is a crisis. What can we do to improve healthcare? And we have phenomenal advantages. In many healthcare interventions, India can provide quality care of world-class standards at 1/20th or 1/10th of the cost. If only we leverage our strengths. We produce the largest pharmaceutical drugs in the country, in the world, the largest number of vaccines in the world of very high quality, and we have tremendous advantages. If we leverage these strengths, if we know how to build a sensible healthcare system, we can transform the future. Whereas we always rise to the challenge after the event, after paying a price in a mission mode, we never put in place a system to take care of our future.
That's absolutely.
That is the real issue. And to just connect it, one last point about political literacy. Ultimately,
Sure, sir.
Political education is about the quality of public discourse. Look at the media today. Forget social media. That is, of course, half-baked knowledge. Every fellow thinks he's an Einstein. He puts something there because he can flick it. But I'm talking about the pundits in the media. What is the quality of discourse? Rarely do they take up meaningful issues. When they do take up, it is so inane and inconsequential. Even if the issue is the right one, there is no depth at all. It's very offhand. Then the local governments, the more local the governmental power is, as I mentioned earlier, the greater the quality of debate. What's happening to my lives? Democracy is not about Mera Bharat Mahan. It's about my street, my school, my health, my child, my future. Unless that happens, there is no real passionate, genuine discussion. And the third is civil society itself. We have very loud civil society. We don't have enough of rational, evidence-based and solution-finding civil society. We have rabble-rousers, too many of them, taking a position. But one good thing about India, and this is what gives me confidence and optimism, all said and done, you take vaccines, or you take COVID, in general, Indian society, Indian polity have acted admirably in my view. While they didn't do enough, and that's the general failing of Indian polity, they did not say vaccines are not necessary. I take it a principle not to have vaccines and all the trash. At large, society accepted it, embraced it. Actually, it's admirable to me. We are a very moderate and balanced society. And even our polity, while there is this lust for power, which is completely clouding their judgment, when it comes to fundamentals, they actually act relatively sanely. That's where the optimism springs from. But there are other factors which are undermining our possibilities. And I think we have to now explore those possibilities and remove those shackles.
Some excellent perspective right there, sir. Really appreciate that. So with that, I would actually like to ask that when we look at the Electoral Commission's report and complex statistics, we found this stunning statistics actually. So over 21 million women voters are missing. Like we look at the Election Commission of India voter turnout reports. We saw that over 2 million voters are absent from the rolls. What is the implication of the report missing 19 million female voters, sir?
Honestly, I haven't seen this report, so I cannot really respond to that. But I can make a few comments on the voter registration process itself.
Sure, sir.
Things have improved considerably. 25 years ago, when I did massive surveys across the country in Andhra Pradesh, in Karnataka, in Delhi, in Kolkata, I have done across the country, in Maharashtra, there were about 45% errors in voter registration in urban areas. Error defined as the wrong name finding place, a person who is not resident or who is not alive, and the right name not finding place together. That's why the number appears very huge, but we must go into the detail. There are some surveys which said even bigger numbers, but I'm always very conservative about this. I don't overstate the facts because then you lose credibility. Even 45% is terrible. I don't know how to say 80%.
Yeah.
Whereas today, thanks to, we worked a lot about that. No, at one time, Election Commission was not interested in voter identity cards. We pushed, and the commission acted. The photo identity cards and so on and so forth, and some other process improvements. While they're not enough has been done, but there's significant improvement in urban. The number I'm giving is about urban areas, not rural areas. 45% urban areas. Rural areas is about 12% in those days. Today, in rural areas, there's only an error of about 4 to 5%. Urban areas about 12%. And if we take false voting or bogus voting, people make a song and dance about it. It's not really true. Rural areas, almost nothing. Very small number when there's collusion between the agents of two parties in certain polling booths. It's about 0.5% or something. Urban areas has come to about 2%. Even 2% is too high, but the point I'm making is there's a huge improvement. And yet in cities, because people don't know each other, unlike in villages, surprisingly in villages, everybody knows, therefore voter registration is much better, much more robust. Cities, there's a lot more improvement possible. I have been working very hard. I spent probably more time and more effort on voter registration, which does not require a law, does not require constitutional amendment. Election Commission has all the power. There's no politics involved. Still the commission failed. We blame politicians and politics. It's not entirely politicians and politics. The Election Commission failed. They want to make grand statements. They don't want to make simple things happen that improve the system considerably because there's no glamour in that. Giving a pontification, a pronouncement to 50 television cameras on a politically sensitive issue is much more funny, much more interesting than actually doing the hard work of improving the quality of electoral rolls. But having said that, things have improved considerably. If only the Aadhaar linkage happens on the voluntary basis, the recent proposal is a good one. I completely endorse that because it's a voluntary one. And if post offices, in my judgment, are made nodal agencies so that anybody can go to a post office well before the election and find out if his or her name is missing, and then file a complaint and give appropriate details and go back after a week and see whether it's registered or not. Right now, we don't have a mechanism of feedback. Therefore, you are surprised on the polling day at the polling booth that your name is missing. And then you have newspapers flashing all this. But I think things have improved considerably. But about the women missing in particular, I'm not familiar. Unless I go into that, I cannot make a comment on
that. Agreed, sir.
So the questions from our side has been come to an end. I would like to call the audience for their questions. We have made a list. So I'll be calling upon the names. Please, technical team, unmute them and make them ask their questions to the panelists. Thank you. It is Aru from the audience.
Am I visible?
Yes, thank you, Aru, for your questions. Please ask your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, both of you, sir. It was a very enlightening session. I didn't come up with any expectations, and I really enjoyed the conversation that you had today. My question to you, both of you, is should the voting age be reduced owing to the fact that there's a lot of policy making that is needed in problems which directly affect us? Or if not that, then how else do we get the representation so that we can speed up these policy making process, which need to be done sooner than later? Thank you.
Ramesh?
I think Dr. JP should go first.
I thought you were younger, so you would answer that first. My answer is no. 18 is good enough. And even those between 18 and 25 are not voting enough numbers. And voting cannot be a very volatile and emotional process each time. In fact, there are some scholars who believe by reducing voting age from 21 to 18, we made politics much more volatile. It may not be true, but I think there is no case further, in my judgment, at this point of time, particularly given our conditions. But I certainly want the young people to be involved much more, not be merely vocal for being vocal's sake, be informed, and exercise their judgment judiciously and participate in the political process. But there is no case for reducing voting age at this point of time, no.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Aru, for asking the question. I would like to call Sugandhi from the audience panel to open up your mic and ask the question. I would, technical team.
Krishna, as Sugandhini has technical issues, the question has been sent to you on the WhatsApp. If you could read it on her behalf.
Yes, sure, sir.
To avoid a paucity of time, I would do it on her behalf. Distinguished members on the panel, Ms. Sugandhi goes as follows. Nowadays, we see most of the youth inclining towards Nota. What is your take on the same?
You know, I was the author of Nota. It was in Andhra Pradesh for the first time in the local elections. Nota was introduced by Mr. Mathurao, who was the election commissioner at my behest. I never believed Nota has any serious implications. It's one of the great myths of India. We somehow pick up one issue out of context and think that's a solution to all the problems of the country. I focused on Nota because the middle classes, they were pretending that they were not voting because there were no options. Everybody was a bad candidate, which is not true in general. But that is an excuse. I wanted that fig leaf, that excuse to be removed and say, if you really are unhappy, then register your protest in an active manner, in a positive manner, that I don't like any of these candidates. That itself will be a moral persuasion for the political parties. But Nota will not have any serious impact in electoral politics. Even when we vigorously campaigned for Nota, we never got more than 1.5% people voting for Nota. It's a great myth. And in fact, some people who, many NGOs, well-meaning NGOs, we don't understand the political implications. They say Nota must be given value. If Nota exceeds a certain number, you must disqualify. These are very dangerous things. India is a very complex and vast country. If you go to Northeast, if you go to Jammu and Kashmir and elsewhere, and if you unnecessarily create fetters for yourself as a nation, a terrorist movement or somebody else can say, let more people vote for Nota, and so that the global demonstration is there that they want to secede from India or some such thing. So Nota has only a limited appeal. It must be used only for that purpose and no more and no less. Don't take Nota beyond that. If really in a situation where everybody is bad, then you still have no excuse to sit back at home, go there, register your protest in the form of Nota so that the parties will wake up. But otherwise, on the whole, in general, a party or a candidate in a context is available. Choose the best judgment possible. Don't find excuses.
Thank you for that answer, sir.
Thank you,
I
sir.
hope-
Okay. Okay, continue, Muskan.
No, I just hope that satisfies the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, delightfully. Yes. So I'll be calling upon CA Naveen Kumar from the audience to please open up his mic and ask his question.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I would like to know why when executive leg requires a particular educational qualification and judiciary leg requires particular qualification, why legislative people who we elect on behalf of us as people's representative doesn't require any qualifications? Yeah.
These are two different questions. The first one about qualifications is a typical middle class myth in the country. The notion that politicians are buffoons, they're uneducated, illiterate, ignorant, which is absolute nonsense. Most of them are extremely well informed, very well qualified, and even when they don't have formal degrees, in some cases, a small number of cases, their capacity for organization and their efficiency, managerial capacity are extraordinary. Otherwise, you could not be in politics. You could not survive for one day. It's a great myth to believe that they're all idiots. It's not true at all. And supposing, let us say, for argument's sake, we agree with you. What do you say? A degree is useful? A degree in this country? What are we talking
not always. Not always.
So these are very, let me be a little blunt. There's a very uninformed myths in this country.
Yeah.
That's not the problem. Even today, even in contemporary politics, I know any number of MLAs and ministers who are outstanding. Their qualities may not come to the fore because the system does not allow them. The chief minister is complete boss, prime minister is the complete boss. They simply shut their mouths. They show their capacity and ability. They're thrown out next day. All kinds of things are there. But it's not because they're unqualified or illiterate or unintelligent. There are other challenges. Earlier, Ramesh mentioned internal party democracy, some form of primary election to choose the candidates, strong local governments to test the mettle of the leaders so that they can elevate themselves, not the dynastic succession, so on and so forth. But not the quality of candidates because they're politicians, they're all bad fellows. This is completely wrong. You can go into great detail, there's no time. But criminalization.
Yeah.
Again, I was the one who started this whole business in 1999. We released a list of 42 candidates contesting in elections in Andhra Pradesh for Assembly and Loksatta with criminal record. That sent shockwaves in the country, then led to litigation, then led to Supreme Court judgment. Then I led a movement to make it mandatory. And I, along with the eminent group of citizens in the country, met the president at that time, Abdul Kalam, asked the ordinance to be sent back. All that happened. Finally, we have a law. But I never believed that that was a solution. Criminalization is a soft underbelly of the system. It gives us space to look at what is happening in our democracy. And politician cannot defend himself. Therefore, they have to look at solutions. Instead, we pretended that is the problem. That is a symptom. And Ramesh mentioned the part I heard later part. Sometimes we are overusing this. For instance, in then Andhra Pradesh, combined Andhra Pradesh, they listed one politician of unimpeachable personal record, Suroram Sudhakar Reddy, the former CPI General Secretary. I don't know if he's still the General Secretary of the party, an outstanding person. You may or may not like his politics and his policies. As a human being, as a person of virtue, he's outstanding. Because there were some technical offenses listed against him, you call him a criminal? You must have deeper understanding. There are very, very quickly, there are 4 issues to be addressed in criminalization. First, in many cases, the person you and I think is a criminal is not seen by the society as a criminal. Society sees him as serving useful purpose because justice system has collapsed. Criminals rose because there is a need for settlement of disputes through rough and ready justice, through brutal means sometimes, because the normal judicial process has simply collapsed in the country. Therefore, they acquired reputation, they acquired money, they acquired organizational clout. The second is, why do they want to enter politics? When they already made money, they're criminals. Why do they want to enter politics? Because the moment they enter politics, you and I are discussing that. Because a criminal, once he enters politics, controls the police whom he should fear. Because we have no rule of law in the country. Those in power, they control. Jiska paas lathi hai, uska ye bhens. You have no rule of law. You have to fix that.
Right, sir.
Right now in Britain, there's a debate going on. There is a police case about trivial things like he had a birthday party in 10 Downing Street when the lockdown was in progress. Police are investigating. The Prime Minister of Britain. Can you imagine police investigating an MLA? Or a chairman of a small municipality? Third, why are the parties inviting them as candidates? Don't say all party leaders are crooks. No, they're desperate to win. They know what is happening. And in our electoral system, if you have the muscle power, the organization, by definition, a criminal gang has 50 or 100 fellows who are loyal. It's a Jew who's will do whatever you want. They acquired money through criminality and settlements. And every criminal who came into politics styled himself as a caste leader or a community leader. There's not one exception. Once you have these 3, money, organization, and a caste clout, you're a winner in politics. Their parties need them. And there's evidence to show that when non-criminals are put up, the same constituencies, they lost. The same party put up a notorious criminal, they won. I can give you any number of examples. Madhepura is one example, for instance.
Yes,
And fourth is, why are we voting for them? Because we are vexed. We don't care about the antecedents. A criminal will go and shout and bully people and get something done, hopefully. We are a system where ordinary, respectful, polite conduct is not yielding any results. Somebody does gundagardi, hopefully something will happen. So if Ramesh and I go and say, no, this is the law, this is the constitution, this is the process, this is the procedure, nobody listens. A gunda says, I'll beat you up or else. So people think this fellow is fighting for us. You build a system which is responsive and accountable and that delivers. Without addressing these 4, we are making it a moral issue as well. We are very fond of morality in India without practicing morality. So we require to build institutional mechanisms to safeguard our society rather than give moral science lectures or be judgmental. Though I listed the criminals, all these criminals came and met me and they told me stories about their lives, about what happened. They all said, sir, you're absolutely right, but it's even worse than what you stated. And they have their own versions of truth. So it's not being judgmental, it's about finding a way out. So it's not a fight between good and evil. It's not about black and white. It's about a complex political process where we messed up. And we have to disentangle this mess and understand how to set it right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, definitely.
Well, moving on, we have Pavani Sweta with us. Oh, you're on mute. Yeah.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes.
Good evening, dignitaries. Here goes my question. What's your suggestion to someone who would like to opt politics as a career?
Pavani, as a career, no. But understanding politics and public space and making contribution as a calling, absolutely yes. But with a caveat. When you say politics, you mean contesting elections, etc. As a person who founded a party, invited people to contest, I would say there's no space. Our electoral system is hostile. And that's not the kind of politics you would like to practice in most parts of the country.
Yes,
but
sir.
you can play a role in local governments where you don't have such a pronounced impact, provided local governments are powerful. Even more important, you can understand the issues that matter. It may be healthcare or education or a local issue about water supply, drainage, stormwater drainage, or storage, or whatever, or even traffic, whatever that matters to you, and make a constructive contribution to through political engagement and pushing the boundaries, not by shore machana, but not by merely rabble rousing, but actually understanding and arousing public consciousness and finding constructive solutions. So that kind of small p politics, yes. But the politics of seeking position without any purpose, I think that's not a good option, and that's not even available in most cases.
Yes, sir. So what's your take on few governments? For example, like there is a recent issue of our Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister stating that we have 26 districts coming forth, and there would be a port for every district. Do you think it's a correct one, or to be focused on instead of having a capital?
No, it's not one or the other. I personally believe that more districts is welcome, and I haven't studied carefully, but the little I understand, it's done reasonably well in my view. But I haven't gone into detail, as I said. And Andhra Pradesh districts are pretty large by Indian standards. We have added only 3 districts to the 20 districts originally in the combined Andhra Pradesh. And of them, one is Vijayanagaram in the present day Andhra Pradesh, other is Prakasam. There's no other state in the country where so few districts are added post-independence. Therefore, I think there is a case for that, if it's done rationally. And from a distance, it appears rational, but the detail I do not know. About airports, no, it's okay. There's nothing wrong in aspirations, but it doesn't mean that you should not build a greenfield city. Forget the capital. I don't care much about the capital. I certainly believe a greenfield city is important to attract investments in this day and age. But that's the other issue of partisan politics. I don't want to go into that now.
Thank you, JP Garu. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And thank you, organizing committee.
Well, thank you, Pavani. Well, the next question for today would be from Girish Gibo. So could you please unmute and turn your camera on if you could?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Myself Girish. I'm from Chittoor, Andhra Pradesh. So my question is for JP sir. So can I go with my regional language, or should I speak in English only?
I'm okay if the organizers are okay with that.
Feel free, sir.
Feel free.
Feel free. JP sir, ఈ క్వశ్చన్ మీకే సార్. లాస్ట్ 1 year ముందు మనం ఎలాంటి సర్కమ్స్టాన్సెస్ ఫేస్ చేసాం మనం చూసాము ఏపీలో. ఈవెన్ నోటా ఉన్నా కూడా క్యాండిడేట్స్ ని మనం యునానిమస్ చేయడం జరిగింది. సో అప్పుడు డెమోక్రటిక్ గా పనిచేసి డెమోక్రటిక్ గా మనం పోరాడాలి, మనం దీన్ని మనం నిలబెట్టాలి, దీని కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ అనగా స్టూడెంట్స్ పైన ఎన్నో కేసెస్ ఏదో జరిగింది. సో దానివల్ల ఏమవుతుందంటే స్టూడెంట్స్ అందరూ చిన్న చిన్న కేసులకు వెనక్కి వెళ్ళాల్సి వస్తుంది. సో దీన్ని ఏమన్నా మార్చగలిగే ఛాన్సెస్ ఏమన్నా ఉందా? సో యూత్ వెనక్కి వెళ్ళిందంటే ఆటోమేటిక్ ఒక జనరేషన్ వెనక్కి వెళ్ళినట్టే కదా.
Girish, what you're asking is the larger question of rule of law. I already mentioned in passing. Normatively, we have rule of law. In reality, we have no rule of law in this country. Rule of law is the bedrock of democracy and a liberal society. Without that, all else fails, no matter what you do, unless people are all treated as equal before law, unless law is above everybody else and nobody is above law, and unless the rights of everybody are protected equally, and unless there is swift and easy access to justice at a low cost in settlement of disputes, unless there is a sure and swift punishment for wrongdoing, the society crumbles. Because our society is strong, families are strong, social sanctions are very strong. Some of it is bad, caste system, etc. Some of it is good. Most people behave well in the country because, my God, if I behave badly, what will my parents think? What will the elders think? What will other people think? It is that social sanction that is keeping us on the straight and narrow path. But these social controls cannot continue for long, because that also means kap panchayats, that also means caste rigidities. Only today I read somewhere that in Tamil Nadu, because a boy and girl loved each other, went and married, they beat up the mother of the boy in the village cruelly. That is not the kind of social sanction we want. We have to move towards modern society. And to even the good part of social sanctions are going to collapse with urbanization, with impersonal lives. So unless rule of law is in place, that means police, independent crime investigation, accountable crime investigation, evidence-based crime investigation based on science and technology, not beating up people and extracting a confession, independent and strong prosecution, and swift trial in the courts, and efficient justice, accessible justice, without paying too much of a price economically for the people. And unless we put a lot of attention to those things, this is inevitable. Today, whoever is in power is calling the shots. Whoever is out of power is complaining about it. To give one illustration, when the current ruling party in Andhra Pradesh was out of power on 26th January, because now we're just a day after 26th January, when they wanted to protest, and it's a right of the political party or people to protest on any day. Only thing is, if it's a state occasion like 26th January, the police have a right and duty to dictate where you should do it and how you should do it. You can't obstruct, you can't really cause dislocation of the state function. That's absolutely a no-no. Otherwise, you must be allowed to protest. Instead, there was a very draconian application of legal principles and they were all put in jail. I attacked them at the time, it's wrong. Equally now, everybody knows the amount of law being taken into hands of those in power, and with reckless demand and arbitrarily the legal process is abused. So it's wrong. Whichever party does it. Unfortunately, in India, every opposition party laments, every ruling party abuses these provisions. We have to fundamentally change the way rule of law functions. Until that time, we are not safe. And it's easy to do it. It's not that it's without a difficulty. It's not that it's impossible. It can be done. But it must be done in a very, very careful manner. In fact, I've devoted a lot of my attention to the Administrative Reforms Commission to look at this, how to reconcile the genuine interests of various stakeholders and do it in a very balanced manner. So there are answers available, but we're not looking at that because people in power are only too happy to abuse that power. And people out of power are salivating at the prospect of they're abusing power rather than restoring the balance.
Thank you for your delightful answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Muskan, please continue.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for being so patient with us and answering all the questions. It was a pleasure to have you with us. I would now like to call upon Sindhuja, the head of the HR team of the Indian Conclave, to give the vote of thanks.
A very good evening to all the respected dignitaries, organizers, and the lovely audience present today. So I'm extremely honored and fortunate to have this glorious opportunity to deliver a vote of thanks on behalf of the Indian Conclave. So this evening, the inspiring remarks, insights, and thought-provoking words of our honorable guest speakers, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan Garu and Sri P.V. Ramesh Garu, who rightfully serve the purpose of this event. That was to enlighten the youth on the India's democracy and its vision for the future. And now I'd like to thank the moderators, Krishna Mohan and Muskan Mishra, for taking this event so professionally and putting up a spectacular event. I should not forget to thank the volunteers, organizing groups, the tech team, staff individuals, and the institutions of the Indian Conclave for making this event a very grand success. Please join us the next time and be a part of discussions, our conversations, and our entire Conclave family. So once again, I'd like to thank Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan Garu and Sri P.V. Ramesh Garu for honoring the event with your presence today, and all the participants for joining your conference today. Thank you. This is Sindhuja signing off.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you and good luck.
thanks
Thank
to all of you and best wishes to everyone. And thanks.
Bye, Ramesh. We'll meet again.
Thanks, sir. We'll see you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, sir.
Very well done. Very well done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you,
to
sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
I think the live can, when the recording can.
Move to the breakout room, no?